Welcome back. Later this year, in April, the fast food minimum wage for workers at major chains will go up to $20 an hour. It was something Governor Gavin Newsom had promoted. Of course, he signed it into law. Did the governor of California exempt a friend and donor from the minimum wage hike for fast food restaurants? There's a law that increases the minimum wage for fast food workers at large chains, but there's an exception for those fast food restaurants where they bake bread and sell bread as a standalone item. And then somebody makes the point that Panera Bread is covered in the exemption, and Greg Flynn has 24 of those franchises. He's a friend of yours. He donated to your campaign. You've done business dealings with him. They asked the Assemblyman, Chris Holden, who carried the bill, what about this carve out for, I know nothing about it. He couldn't even talk about it. And so Bloomberg does a story where they say, well, listen, what a coincidence that it's a friend of Gavin Newsom who doesn't have to pay the $20 an hour minimum wage.
It turns out, A, it's not true. He never talked to me about it, period, full stop. So it's an absurd story.
He didn't have to talk to you about it.
Look, I was out there championing for a couple of years higher minimum wage for working families, particularly disproportionate number of African Americans and women that are working increasingly in the fast food industry. And I'm proud of that. It's nation-leading efforts. As it relates to discussions around this, it was done in a partnership with the legislature over the course of 2 years, public hearings, public engagement. There were some discussions around bakeries and this and that, but in relationship to this story, it's absurd, period.
Well, you said it's absurd, but when somebody brought that to your attention earlier.
There's a provision in this bill that exempts bakeries, essentially places that sell and bake bread on site, so carving out essentially Panera and Boudin. I wonder, why in the agreement did you all decide that those workers should not be within the umbrella of this?
That's part of the sausage making. That was part of 257, the original bill, and we went back and forth, and there was part of the negotiation. It's the nature of negotiation. There's a lot of component parts in the industry. It's not just Jack in the Box, not just McDonald's. There are a lot of different players. This affects a lot of different franchisees and different models as it relates to that, and different conditions and environments. And so that was all part of the give and take, and that was the collective wisdom of the legislature, and ultimately led to my signature.
Well, it's part of the sausage making. Was that
as it relates to the issue of bakeries, as it relates to the carve-outs and the details that were done with this deep coalition? By the way, there were tons of component parts of this. There were probably 100+ people that were part of this across the spectrum. And so, again, on the merits, it's just factually incorrect.
Right. So, to that point, it's a coincidence that that this new minimum wage law did not impact a campaign contributor of yours.
It does impact. The Restaurant Association just came out with a statement saying it does impact. SEIU, one of the principal negotiators, said they didn't believe it didn't.
The Los Angeles Times editorial board has been supporting you on many occasions. They even say, listen, this doesn't make sense to us. And yes, you say that they are covered by this.
We're belaboring the point. The point is they're not exempt, so I don't know what the issue is.
You're proud of the minimum wage hike.
It's nation leading. We're to show the dignity for these hardworking folks, and that was the whole point behind this.
True, we understand that.
Well, I'm not sure everyone does. I'm not sure people
but we
understand
also
the
understand
issue.
McDonald's is raising prices. Jack in the Box is raising prices.
They were raising prices before the $20 minimum wage. Period. Full stop. Go back and look. They were raising it consistently before.
Right. But even,
and do you want folks that are working full time and trying to raise a family in emergency rooms, getting uncompensated care? Of course not. You want folks to have some dignity in their lives, some opportunity, some growth. This is nation leading, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that we focus on not just growth in California, but inclusion. And I just, I think this is something that should be emulated in many other states all across the country.
A lot of businesses will say, we don't mind paying the higher minimum wage. We just worry about the consumer paying the higher minimum wage.
Well, look, I know a thing or two about this. I've started many restaurants, hundreds and hundreds of employees I've created in the restaurant industry specifically. We're doing fine. McDonald's is doing fine. Take a look at their profits. Take a look at how well these folks are doing right now. So I just think we got to take care of our workers and working families. I think we should take care of folks that are taking care of us and not have people live on wages that barely can even afford I mean, they can't. How do you live in this state with wages south of $20? So I just thought it was the right thing to do, and these franchisees seem to be doing pretty well. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them.
Last question. Summarize Prop 1 for us in layman's terms. What do you want voters to think of? Not perhaps failures of the past, but the promise of a future and a change of approach.
Well, I think look, and people need to know in the 60s we had 37,000 psychiatric beds in the state of California. We have 5,500 today. In the 60s we had 37,000, a population of 16 million. We have close to 40 million people today and just 5,500 psychiatric beds. This is about creating 11,000+ new psychiatric beds with permitting and siting reform, with accountability, with oversight, and it's also about reimagining and reforming an old Mental Health Services Act to address the challenges that exist and persist today that are radically different than they were 20 or 30 years ago. More oversight, more accountability, fast tracking at scale to address the #1 issue, a #1 complaint in the state of California, and that's the quality of life on the streets and sidewalks, and those that feel like the old binary is criminalized or someone ends up on the streets in a tent, in addressing that gap in a meaningful way.
Thank you very much, Governor.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Governor Gavin Newsom will have some final comments after this.